there's some symptoms with benzo withdrawal that you really notice straight away when they're gone, because the experience of those symptoms is so intense. So their absence is stark. It's impossible to ignore. You know, a really intense physical symptom would be an example of this. Something like akathisia. It's pretty windy. There are other symptoms that it takes a long time to know whether they're really gone. And that could be because they need sort of a triggering event for them to happen. I used to have incredible bouts of anger and rage. Just uncontrollable. And I didn't really have issues with anger before benzo withdrawal. I made a video about this topic on this page here, offering some tips for dealing with anger and rage during benzo withdrawal. I dealt with it for a long time. It was one of those symptoms that really persisted. And when I was in a really intense episode of it, I would, do and say things I regretted. I didn't really ever become physically violent. Well, not with other people, at least. I'd punch a wall, that kind of thing. But when it was happening, it felt like possession. It felt like I was being possessed by something inhuman, some horrible force. And afterwards, of course, you're in shambles, you're shaking, and then the rush of panic and anxiety layered on top because of what you just did or what you just said. And I'm not saying it felt like possession because I'm trying to wiggle my way out of the personal responsibility aspect of it. I'm just saying it because that's really what it felt like. And in some ways, benzo withdrawal, benzos have transformed our brains in a way that makes us someone who we are not, or who we were not. But anger and rage is one of those, it's one of those symptoms now that it really feels like it's gone. And the other day, this little thing happened that in my previous benzo withdrawal world would have sent me into a massive fit of rage. And it was as simple as an antihistamine in my hand, a small pill, cetirizine, in my hand, falling to the ground, and somehow managing to go all the way underneath the dresser, all the way to the wall, and then somehow get stuck in between a floorboard in the wall. This was a really old house. This was just back when I was in the States just now. And gets wedged in there. Something that just seemed so physically impossible. This is this is one of those things that seems ridiculous, but it almost becomes its own law of the universe. You drop something on the ground that you need, and all of a sudden it manages to travel 50 feet to the most inaccessible part of the room you're standing in. What the hell? And it just feels like, a cruel trick of the physical laws of the universe that can even happen. Of course, when you're going through benzo withdrawal, the fact that something that can happen, it's just really twisting the knife. But this happened the other day, and I managed just to laugh about it. A couple of years ago, I would have been looking for an axe to split that dresser in two, to just blast it to smithereens. I would have been in such a fit of rage for a tiny incident like that. The fact that I spontaneously started laughing, I didn't even have to tell myself. There was no top-down directive. There was no me telling myself to take a breath. It just happened. It was my impulse was to laugh. And the fact that that was my impulse, at least for that day, I'm not saying permanently. Jesus, I'm not saying permanently. I'm not saying I've found enlightenment. Oh my God, very far from it. But the fact that I can have one day, one moment like that, is a freaking miracle. You know, you use the word miracle and it's like, it's something that shouldn't happen. Or it's something that's so unlikely to happen. Improbable. And when you're dealing with benzo withdrawal, and things are hardly improving, and then suddenly they're getting worse, and then you feel like you've reached a new low when you think you should be going in the other direction. The idea of healing does seem like a miracle. It does seem so out of reach, improbable, like it can't happen. And then it does. I made that video about anger and rage, and you know, it was tips to deal with the anger and rage. Obviously, you wanna tear that thing out by the root. You want the anger and rage itself to be gone, so you don't need coping mechanisms. And this is that combination of time, passage of time, and the different interventions that are not static, that change over time, the different things that we can try to do to either speed up the recovery or just make it easier on us. But even with the passage of time, even with all of those interventions, changing diet, lifestyle, changing the way you breathe, it still feels like a miracle. When you think about those low moments. I guess that's really all I want to say right now. Hopefully that was audible, because there is a lot of wind today. The tide's starting to come in, and we are still in the rainy season here in Senegal. Probably another week or two, and then we get to November when it's about a 6-month period of really nice weather begins in Senegal, at least on the coast. And it's early enough now that I should be able to still go and spot some birds. Talking about interventions, and I made a video about that too. Going for walks and looking for birds. That was and still is a very comforting activity, a very good way to start the day. You want to talk about getting yourself on the right track? This kind of heavy, humid air, but the temperature's just right now. A little bit of breeze, early morning breeze with that humidity. You gotta just savor it, because you know in a couple hours it's gonna be brutal. But right now this is perfect. Dogs are enjoying the temperature too. They're all curled up sleeping right now. Don't really know why I'm still filming. Guess you're just you're accompanying me on my little walk here. We can walk up to the top of the hill and then we can go our separate ways. Maybe we'll see something interesting in the meantime. This woman's garden here, she's got so many lovely trees and plants. Really attract the birds, but multiple occasions now we've had kind of a standoff because I was looking into her yard, and at one point I was taking pictures of there's an indigo bird right there. And that's the thing, I can't really stick around in front of her house anymore because I don't know if she thinks I'm up to something or I'm just looking at the birds. She's got a really low wall around her house so you can see straight in. And you walk by a tree full of birds like that, it's pretty hard to just keep moving along. But yeah, we've never really properly met, and it seems that we've got off on the wrong foot. Well, this is where I'm going to leave you for today. I hope you guys are doing okay. As always, if you want to talk, just send me an email, lifeafterbenzos@gmail.com. See you soon.